When I first traveled down to the Yucatan in 1995, as an architectural photographer, I was very interested in Mayan ruin sites that date back to the classic period of 600 AD to 900 AD. And I primarily focused on architectural ruins, ruins of churches, haciendas, and also portraits of people in these settings. I knew that I needed a trip to Mexico when I would become numb with my commercial work, when I could no longer feel if something was good or if something was bad. And I knew that that was the time that I should go down to Mexico and really delve into my artistic side as a photographer.
My name is Riley Rhodes. I'm the director and curator of contemporary and modern print exhibitions. I have been a museum curator for almost a half a century. Bob Hansen's work is rather unique for Southern California artists. He can define what makes a great photograph. His work is technically excellent. He understands that what is important about a photograph is the composition, the lighting, that he is able to bring the subject to the viewer and capture their interest in learning more about the work.
About 25 trips to the Yucatan, southern Mexico, Oaxaca, Veracruz, I started to want to produce a book out of this project. One of my favorite images from the trip was an image that we made after a half day's journey into the jungle. We rounded a bend, and there in front of us was a 1500s mission, Franciscan mission, with clouds forming over it. And I don't even think that I stopped the car. I jumped out, put up my view camera, and made 2 exposures, and that's the cover of my book. Oftentimes in our travels, we would travel very far into the jungle, into places that did not have any roads up until about 15 years ago. And my Spanish was very limited, but also in these villages, only Mayan was spoken. So we had to break through with the local populace in communicating, and I found that making photographs, making images, being involved in the artistic process was a surefire way to immediately bridge any sort of language barrier with the population there. And that was one of the very significant things for me as an artist, is the ability to communicate in situations where you don't speak the language. On our first night after arriving during Hurricane Andrew, my nature is to immediately hit the streets, and it was a nighttime, very humid night. A lot of Mayan were out on the streets of the Zocala, having music, dancing, and I came upon an image of a Mayan vendor with one light bulb illuminating their wares, and that was a setting against the 1500s or the 500-year-old church San Ildefonso. And it was a wonderful image because the police at the time saw that what we were trying to do. I was setting up my 8x10 view camera there in the street, and the police worked with us, and I was able to make my exposure at night of this wonderful scene in front of me. A lot of my subject matter, they were used to photographers shooting with view cameras, so they were very patient with me, and they fell naturally into the compositions, which was very meaningful to me. It was almost a collaboration of subject and photographer.
If I go to an exhibit in a museum and I see the artist's work, I sometimes have to wonder why it's been selected. It just doesn't communicate the way that Hansen's work communicates, and that's the basics. So that's, that's got to be presented. Now, some of that is done in the darkroom. It's not just produced by taking a picture. Anybody can push the button on the camera, but somebody has to line it up, get the composition, know what they want to communicate, and that's telling the story. That's what Hansen is good at. That's what he's effective at. That's why I'm interested in representing him and presenting his work to museums.
In 2012, I had a request from my collectors. I designed a limited edition portfolio from 8 of my favorite images from the book. These prints were made from the original 8x10 negatives photographed from 1995 through 2004. I selected the images with the goal in mind to create a unified vision of tonality and emotional impact when the prints would be displayed as a complete series. The portfolio is all encased in a custom handmade clamshell portfolio box and includes a slipcover book. Also is included is 8 platinum palladium contact prints, hand-printed by myself and limited to an edition of 25 with 2 artist proofs. The images were all made during a time and place in Mexico before the events of 9/11 and also before the internet was prevalent. This very special portfolio is available through the House of Photographic Arts in San Juan Capistrano, California, and through contemporary and modern print exhibitions of Laguna Niguel, California, and also on my website at www.roberthansen.com.